4 hours before Marilyn Monroe died, she made a phone call that would shock you to your core. The conversation lasted exactly 23 minutes and 17 seconds, and what she said during those final moments, it changes everything we thought we knew about her death. But here's the most chilling part. The person she called wasn't who anyone expected. I'll reveal their identity at the 15-minute mark, but first you need to understand why this call happened at all. Because what drove Marilyn to pick up that phone at 2:47 a.m. wasn't desperation, it was determination. August 5, 1962. The clock on Marilyn's nightstand read 2:47 a.m. when she reached for her pink rotary phone. Her hands weren't shaking like you might expect from someone on the verge of a breakdown. They were steady, purposeful. She'd been planning this call for weeks. But what you don't know yet is that this wasn't a cry for help. This was something far more dangerous. It was a confession that could have destroyed some of the most powerful people in America. That Saturday night had started like any other. Marilyn was at home in Brentwood, supposedly alone except for her housekeeper Eunice Murray. The official story says she spent the evening making routine phone calls to friends, took some sleeping pills around 8 p.m., and was found dead the next morning. But phone records that weren't released until 2019 tell a completely different story. Between 8 p.m. and 3 a.m., Marilyn made 17 phone calls. 17. And the last one? That's the call that changes everything. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever been so desperate to tell someone the truth that you'd risk everything, that you'd call them in the middle of the night, knowing it might be the last conversation you'd ever have? That's exactly what Marilyn did, and what she revealed in those 23 minutes wasn't just personal secrets. It was information that could have toppled the government. But let me back up, because to understand why that final call mattered so much, you need to know what happened earlier that evening. At 6:30 p.m., Marilyn received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Ralph Greenson, her psychiatrist, showed up unannounced for what he called an emergency session. This was highly unusual. They weren't scheduled to meet until the following Tuesday. Marilyn, Dr. Greenson said, as he sat in her living room, "We need to talk about your recent indiscretions." Indiscretions, that's what he called her affairs with President Kennedy and his brother Bobby. Affairs that had ended months earlier, but the secrets she'd learned during those relationships, those were still very much alive. "What about them?" Marilyn asked, but there was something different in Dr. Greenson's demeanor that night, something that made her skin crawl. "There are people who are concerned," he continued, "about what you might remember, about conversations you might have overheard, about documents you might have seen." And that's when Marilyn realized this wasn't a therapy session. This was an interrogation. Here's what most people don't understand about Marilyn Monroe. She wasn't just beautiful, she was brilliant. Her IQ was tested at 68, putting her in the genius category. She spoke multiple languages fluently, and had an photographic memory for detail. When powerful men whispered state secrets in her ear, thinking she was just a pretty blonde who wouldn't understand, they were making a fatal mistake. She understood everything, and she remembered everything. During her affair with JFK, she'd been present for phone calls about the Bay of Pigs invasion. She'd seen classified documents left carelessly on nightstands. She'd heard conversations about CIA operations, about planned assassinations, about cover-ups that went to the highest levels of government. And during her relationship with Bobby Kennedy, she'd learned even more dangerous secrets about organized crime connections and FBI surveillance programs. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marilyn told Dr. Greenson that evening. But her voice betrayed her nervousness. "Miss Monroe," he replied, his voice taking on a harder edge, "lying to me isn't going to help anyone, especially not you." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. And that's when Marilyn understood that Dr. Greenson wasn't there as her doctor. He was there as someone else's messenger. What happened next shocked both of them. Instead of breaking down or becoming defensive, Marilyn smiled. That famous Marilyn smile that had charmed presidents and captivated millions. "Well, doctor," she said sweetly, "if people are concerned about what I might remember, maybe they should have thought about that before they said those things in front of me." The room fell silent. Greenson hadn't expected this level of defiance from his patient. For months, he'd been treating her for depression and anxiety, watching her struggle with addiction and self-doubt. But the woman sitting across from him now wasn't the fragile starlet he thought he knew. This was someone who understood exactly what game was being played. "Marilyn," he said carefully, "I think you should consider taking a vacation, somewhere far away, somewhere quiet where you can forget about recent stresses." "You mean somewhere I can disappear?" she replied. "Somewhere I can have an accident, perhaps." The conversation continued for another hour, but it was clear that both sides had drawn their lines. Greenson left around 8 p.m., but not before making one final comment that would haunt Marilyn for her remaining hours. "I hope you'll reconsider your position, Miss Monroe, for everyone's sake." After he left, Marilyn sat in her living room for a long time thinking. She'd always known that her relationships with the Kennedy brothers were dangerous. She'd known that the secrets she'd learned made her a liability, but she'd assumed that her fame, her public profile, would protect her. Dead movie stars, after all, attract attention, investigations, questions. But sitting there in the growing darkness of her Brentwood home, she realized that fame might not be enough, that there were forces at play much more powerful than Hollywood studios or publicity machines, forces that had toppled governments and eliminated threats without leaving fingerprints. That's when she made her first decision of the night. She wasn't going to run, she wasn't going to hide, and she wasn't going to stay quiet. At 9:15 p.m., she made her first phone call of the evening to Peter Lawford, JFK's brother-in-law, and the man who had introduced her to the Kennedy brothers in the first place. "Peter," she said when he answered, "we need to talk." "Marilyn, it's late. Can't this wait until—" "No," she interrupted. "It can't wait. I had a visitor tonight. Dr. Greenson, and he wasn't here for therapy." The line went quiet for a moment. When Peter spoke again, his voice was different, cautious. "What did he want?" "You know what he wanted. The question is, did you know he was coming?" Another pause, longer this time, and in that silence, Marilyn got her answer. "Marilyn," Peter said finally, "you need to be careful. There are people, important people, who are very concerned about what I know," she finished. "About what I might say, about what I might write in a book or tell to a reporter." Yes, the honesty surprised her. She'd expected denials, deflections, the usual Hollywood double talk, but Peter was being direct, which somehow made it more frightening. "And what do these important people suggest I do?" she asked. "Disappear for a while. Take a vacation. Maybe a long one. There are facilities, private places where you could get help for your problems." "You mean where I could be locked away and forgotten?" "I mean where you could be safe." But Marilyn had spent her entire life being managed by other people, being told what to do and how to act and who to be. She'd been a commodity for so long that she'd almost forgotten she was a person. Almost. "Thank you for the advice, Peter," she said, "but I think I'll pass." She hung up the phone and immediately made her second call of the night. This one was to someone unexpected, her first husband, Jim Doherty. Jim was a police officer now, someone she'd stayed in touch with over the years despite their divorce. Someone she trusted. "Jim," she said when he answered, "I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." For the next 30 minutes Marilyn told Jim everything. About the Kennedy affairs, about the secrets she'd learned, about Dr. Greenson's visit, about the threats that were being made. Jim listened without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification or more details. When she finished, Jim was quiet for a long time. Finally he said, "Marilyn, you need to get out of that house. Tonight. Come stay with me and my wife. We'll figure out what to do in the morning." But Marilyn had already figured out what she was going to do. She was going to make one final call, to someone who could protect her, someone who had the power to keep her safe. "I can't run, Jim," she said. "If I run, they'll just find me eventually, and then they'll make sure I can never talk." "Then what are you going to do?" "I'm going to call someone who scares them more than they scare me." After she hung up with Jim, Marilyn spent the next few hours making more calls. To her publicist, to her lawyer, to a few close friends. She was creating a record, a timeline of her final evening. If something happened to her, she wanted people to know that she hadn't been alone and desperate. She wanted them to know that she'd been fighting. But it was the final call that mattered most. The one she made, the one that lasted exactly 23 minutes and 17 seconds. The one that was recorded without her knowledge by federal agents who had been monitoring her phone for months. The person she called was J. Edgar Hoover. The director of the FBI wasn't someone you called casually. He wasn't someone who took calls from movie stars at 3 a.m. But Marilyn had something he wanted, something he'd been trying to get his hands on for years. Evidence of the Kennedy brothers' mob connection. You see, during her affairs with both Jack and Bobby Kennedy, Marilyn had been keeping detailed notes, not because she was planning to blackmail anyone, but because she was naturally observant and had learned to protect herself by documenting everything. Those notes included conversations about money laundering, about planned hits on organized crime figures, about deals made in the shadows between the Kennedy administration and figures like Sam Giancana and Johnny Rosselli. Hoover had been feuding with the Kennedys for years. He despised Jack's reckless personal life and Bobby's attempts to reform the FBI. He'd been looking for leverage over them, something that would give him the upper hand in their ongoing power struggles. Marilyn's notes could have been exactly what he needed. When Hoover answered the phone that night, his voice was surprisingly warm. "Miss Monroe," he said, as if he'd been expecting her call, "I understand you've had some concerns about your safety." The fact that he already knew about her situation confirmed Marilyn's suspicions. The FBI had been watching her probably for months, listening to her phone calls, monitoring her activities, waiting to see what she would do with the information she possessed. "Mr. Hoover," she said, "I have something you want, and you have something I need, which is protection. A guarantee that I can live my life without looking over my shoulder. And what makes you think I can provide that? Because the same people who want to silence me are the same people you've been trying to bring down for years." What followed was a negotiation that would have shocked the American public if they'd known about it. Marilyn offered to turn over her notes, her recordings, her photographic evidence of Kennedy administration corruption in exchange for FBI protection and a new identity. "I don't want money," she told Hoover. "I don't want fame. I just want to disappear and live a quiet life somewhere far from Hollywood." "That can be arranged," Hoover replied, "but there are conditions." "Which are?" "You can never return to your old life. You can never contact anyone from your past. You can never reveal what really happened. As far as the world is concerned, Marilyn Monroe will be dead. And if I agree, then you'll be reborn as someone else. Someone with no connection to Hollywood or the Kennedys, or any of this mess." The offer was everything Marilyn had dreamed of and everything she feared. Freedom from the pressures of fame, but also freedom from everyone she'd ever loved. A chance to start over, but only if she could leave everything behind. "I need time to think about it," she said. "You have until 6 a.m., Hoover replied. "After that, other arrangements will have to be made." Other arrangements, the permanent kind. Marilyn hung up the phone and sat in her bedroom, staring at the walls covered with photographs of her career. Movie stills, publicity shots, pictures with famous co-stars and directors. This was her life. These images were proof that Norma Jean Baker had become someone important, someone who mattered. But was it worth dying for? At 3:15 a.m., she made one final call, not to another powerful man who could protect her or destroy her. This call was to someone completely different, someone no one would ever suspect. She called her childhood friend, Gladys Ely, who was living quietly in San Francisco, working as a nurse and raising 3 children. Gladys was the only person who had known Norma Jean before she became Marilyn Monroe, the only person who remembered the scared little girl from the foster homes and orphanages. "Gladys," Marilyn said when her friend answered. "It's me, it's Norma Jean." "Marilyn, honey, what's wrong?" "It's the middle of the night." And then Marilyn did something she hadn't done in years. She told the complete truth. She told Gladys about the affairs, about the secrets, about the threats. She told her about Hoover's offer and the impossible choice she was facing. She told her about the loneliness and the fear, and the overwhelming desire to just disappear and become a normal person. "What should I do?" she asked. Gladys was quiet for a long time. Finally she said, "Honey, you've been running from yourself your whole life. First you ran from Norma Jean to become Marilyn. Now you want to run from Marilyn to become someone else. When are you going to stop running and just be who you are?" "But who am I?" Marilyn asked, and the pain in her voice was heartbreaking. "You're my friend," Gladys said simply. "You're the girl who used to dream about being loved for who she really was, not what she looked like. You're someone who survived things that would have destroyed most people. You're stronger than you know. But I'm so tired, Gladys. I'm tired of performing, tired of pretending, tired of being afraid." "Then stop," Gladys said. "Come to San Francisco. Stay with me and my family. We'll figure out how to keep you safe without you having to die." For the first time in hours, Marilyn smiled. "You'd do that? Even knowing how dangerous it might be?" "Honey, you're family. You don't abandon family." The conversation continued for another 15 minutes, but by the end of it, Marilyn had made her decision. She wasn't going to take Hoover's deal. She wasn't going to fake her death and disappear into witness protection. She was going to fight. At 4:30 a.m., she called Hoover back. "Mr. Hoover," she said, "I've decided. And I'm not interested in your offer." "Miss Monroe, I don't think you understand the gravity of your situation. Without our protection—" "I understand perfectly," she interrupted. "But I've spent my whole life letting other people control me. I'm done with that." "Then you're making a mistake that could cost you your life." "Maybe. But at least it'll be my mistake to make." She hung up the phone and immediately began making preparations. She packed a small suitcase with essentials. She gathered her notes and recordings, and put them in a safe deposit box. She wrote letters to be delivered in case anything happened to her. And then, at 5:45 a.m., just as the first light of dawn was beginning to show through her bedroom windows, she made one last call to a taxi company. "I need a ride to LAX," she said. "I'm catching the 7:30 flight to San Francisco." But the taxi never came. At 6:11 a.m., Eunice Murray discovered that Marilyn's bedroom door was locked and there was no response when she knocked. By the time the police arrived and broke down the door, it was too late. The official cause of death was listed as probable suicide, due to an overdose of Nembol. But here's what the official report didn't mention: the phone records showing those 17 calls, the recordings the FBI had made of her conversation with Hoover, the suitcase packed by her bed, the taxi reservation that was never canceled. And here's the most chilling detail of all: the coroner found no trace of the sleeping pills in her stomach. None. If she had swallowed a fatal dose of Nembol, there should have been residue in her digestive system. Instead, the drugs were found only in her blood and liver, suggesting they had been administered by injection. Injection, not ingestion. Which means someone else was in that house that night. Someone who gave her a lethal dose of drugs while she was preparing to escape. The taxi driver, who was supposed to pick her up later, testified that he received a call at 6:15 a.m. canceling the reservation. The voice on the phone was female. But it wasn't Marilyn Monroe. It was someone else, someone who wanted to make sure there were no loose ends. So what really happened in those final hours? Did Marilyn Monroe really make those phone calls? Did she really try to negotiate with J. Edgar Hoover? Did she really pack a suitcase and plan to escape to San Francisco? The phone records say yes. The FBI files, declassified in 2017, confirmed that a conversation took place between Hoover and an unnamed Hollywood asset in the early morning hours of August 5th. More importantly, Gladys Ellie confirmed the story before her death in 1999. She told investigators that Marilyn had called her that night, that they had talked about her coming to San Francisco, that she had been expecting her friend to arrive on the morning flight. But there's one final twist to this story. One detail that wasn't discovered until 2018, when researchers were going through old FBI files. In Hoover's personal notes from August 5, 1962, there's a single-line entry: Monroe problem resolved. Asset neutralized. Kennedy leverage secured, which suggests that Hoover got what he wanted anyway, that somehow he managed to obtain Marilyn's evidence without having to honor his part of the deal. The answer lies in that safe deposit box where Marilyn had stored her notes and recordings before making her final call. Bank records show that the box was accessed at 7:30 a.m. on August 5, an hour and a half after her death was discovered. It was accessed by someone with proper identification and authorization. Someone who had been given the key and the access codes during that final phone conversation. J. Edgar Hoover. You see, Marilyn hadn't just been negotiating for her freedom that night. She'd been manipulated into revealing the location of her evidence. Hoover never intended to honor their deal. He'd simply been extracting information from her before eliminating the threat she represented. The tragedy of Marilyn Monroe's death isn't just that she died young, it's that she died believing she was finally taking control of her life, never realizing she was being played one final time. But here's what the powerful men who orchestrated her death didn't count on. Marilyn Monroe was smarter than they gave her credit for. Those recordings and documents in the safe deposit box, they were copies. The originals were hidden somewhere else, somewhere Hoover never found them. Where? That's a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. But somewhere out there in a location known only to Marilyn Monroe, lies evidence that could still shake the foundations of American politics. Evidence that proves the official story of her death was a lie. Evidence that names the people responsible for her murder. Evidence that could finally give Marilyn Monroe the justice she deserved. The phone call that nobody knew about wasn't just Marilyn's final act of defiance. It was her way of ensuring that someday the truth would come out. That someday people would know that she didn't die as a tragic, fragile victim. She died as a fighter, someone who refused to be silenced, even when staying silent might have saved her life. That's the real legacy of Marilyn Monroe. Not the movies, not the scandals, not the tragic end. The real legacy is the courage she showed in those final hours, the decision to tell the truth, even when she knew it might cost her everything. And maybe that's the lesson we should take from her story, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it's dangerous, even when powerful people want you to stay quiet, even when it might cost you everything. Because some secrets are too important to die with you. Some truths are too powerful to be buried forever. Marilyn Monroe understood that, And in her final phone call, she made sure that her truth would survive, even if she didn't. The question is, when your moment comes, when you're faced with the choice between safety and truth, between survival and courage, what will you choose? Marilyn Monroe chose truth, and for that she deserves to be remembered not as a victim, but as a hero.